I walked out of the convocation hall without saying a word to anyone. Not to my daughter, not to my son-in-law, not to my wife, who was still standing near the front row, beaming at her granddaughter in a way I hadn't seen her beam at anything in years. I walked through the double doors, past the usher who was still holding programs for late arrivals, down the concrete steps of the Ryerson building and out onto Gould Street. It was April. The kind of April that Toronto gives you when it wants to apologize for March. Pale sun, cold in the shade, pigeons moving in slow circles near a Tim Hortons cup someone had left on the steps. I stood there for a moment. Then I kept walking. That was the day my granddaughter graduated with her degree in nursing. The day my wife looked at the corsage I had pinned to my lapel. The one I'd been so proud of, a small white lily from the florist on our street, the same one I'd bought for every family occasion for 31 years, and said, in front of her daughter and son-in-law and 2 of their friends, "Why on earth did you wear that? It looks ridiculous on a man your age." She said it lightly, the way people say things they've said 100 times before. The way you say something when you stopped considering whether it might land. I didn't answer. I pinned the lily back into place and we went inside. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years married to a woman I loved, or believed I loved, or tried every day to love more competently than the day before. I worked as a land surveyor for the federal government for 34 years. I retired at 63 with a pension and a pocket of silence I didn't know what to do with. I am not a dramatic person. I don't make scenes. I don't raise my voice. I had never in 31 years walked out of anything, but I want to start where it began. Not with the corsage, not with that morning. I want to start somewhere closer to the root of it, which was my daughter's wedding, 26 years earlier, and the day I understood that I was living inside a story where someone else held the pen. My wife, I'll call her my wife because that's what she was, and names have a way of making things feel smaller than they are, came into my life when I was 35 and she was 32. She had a daughter from her first marriage. The girl was 6. Small, quiet, watchful in the way some children are when they've learned early that watching is safer than trusting. I want to be honest, I didn't know how to be a step-parent. Nobody hands you a manual. My own father had been the kind of man who showed up, worked hard, said little, and considered that sufficient. I tried to do better. I read things. I asked questions. I drove my stepdaughter to ballet on Tuesday evenings, even when it meant missing my Thursday evening woodworking class 3 weeks in a row. I taught her to ride a bicycle in the parking lot of the community center on Bayview. I sat through 4 years of school concerts. And my wife, she appreciated it. In the beginning, she'd say things like, "She really trusts you," or "She talks about you at school." Her teacher asked me about her father, and she said, "He's not my father, but he's mine." I held on to that for a long time. The problem was never that my stepdaughter didn't love me. I believe she did. I believe she does. The problem was that my wife was very good at standing between us at exactly the moment when the distance between us might have closed completely. I didn't see it for years. I thought it was just her personality, protective, a little guarded, not good at sharing. Later I came to understand it differently. She needed to be the indispensable one, the one who translated us to each other, the one without whom neither of us could quite reach the other. It was a way of being necessary. I don't say this with anger anymore. I've had 3 years to sit with it. I say it because it's true. When my stepdaughter was 22, she met a man I'll call my son-in-law, because that's what he became, an engineer, a genuinely decent person, quiet in his own way, the kind of quiet that comes from confidence rather than fear. He loved my stepdaughter in a way that was good to witness. They got married in September at a vineyard Niagara on the lake, which my wife's sister had helped arrange at a significant discount because she worked in event planning. I paid for most of it, not because I was asked, because I wanted to, because I had spent 22 years being the person who showed up, and I wanted the showing up to mean something you could point to. At the reception, there were speeches, her maid of honor, a friend from university in Kingston, my son-in-law's older brother who flew in from Vancouver and told a story about teaching his brother to drive stick shift in a parking lot, my wife who cried beautifully and said all the right things about watching her daughter grow into a woman, and then there was the moment before dessert when the DJ asked if anyone else wanted to say something, and I stood up. I had prepared something. Not long. 3 minutes maybe. I'd written it out and then thrown the paper away and tried to memorize it because I didn't want to read off a card. I wanted to look at her when I said it. I stood up and my wife put her hand on my arm. "You don't need to," she said quietly, "just for me. I want to. People are tired. The night's almost done." I looked at her. She was smiling, but the smile had that particular quality. Pleasant on the surface, immovable underneath. I had seen it many times. I sat down. My stepdaughter didn't know I had stood up. She was talking to someone at the next table. She didn't see. My wife said afterward in the car that she'd done me a favor, that I'd had a little too much wine and it wouldn't have gone well. I had had 1 glass. I had been nursing it for 2 hours because I was driving. I didn't argue. That's what I did for a very long time. I didn't argue. The years after the wedding were ordinary, in the way long marriages go. Ordinary. We ate dinner. We watched television. We visited my stepdaughter and son-in-law when they had their first child, a girl, and then a second, a boy. I drove 4 hours to Sudbury when they temporarily relocated for his work, and I spent a weekend building a garden box in their backyard while my wife sat inside with her daughter. I came in at the end of the day with dirt on my knees, and my wife looked up from the kitchen table and said, "There's still some roast if you want it," and that was the full extent of the acknowledgement. I ate the roast. It was good. I thanked her, and I went to bed. When the grandchildren were old enough to have opinions about things, they developed opinions about me. The girl, my oldest grandchild, was the first one to start calling me by my given name. Not Grandpa, not Papa, which is what some of the other grandparents were called, but my first name, Elliot, as though we were friends. I'd noticed it start when she was around 8. I assumed my son-in-law's parents had suggested it, a way of distinguishing between sets of grandparents. I didn't push back. What I did notice, slowly over years, was that she grew into a young woman who came to me when she needed something real, not money. She'd come to her grandmother for money, or to her mother. She'd come to me when she was trying to figure out something. When she was 16 and she'd had a falling out with her 2 closest friends and didn't know how to repair it. When she was 18 and second-guessing her choice of program. When she was studying for her licensing exams and needed to talk to someone who would listen without immediately offering solutions. That was us. That was what we had. Quiet, useful, real. So when she graduated, 4 years of nursing, 2 years of clinical placements, the whole long effort of it. I was proud in a way I didn't have words for. I bought the corsage because it was what I always did. It was my gesture. It was what I had. And my wife said what she said in front of everyone, and I didn't answer. And we went inside, and I sat in row 7 and watched my granddaughter walk across the stage in her black gown, and I clapped as hard as I've ever clapped for anything. Then there was the reception afterward, a restaurant not far from the campus. Her parents had booked a private room, 22 people, the good kind of dinner where everyone is genuinely happy. My granddaughter had asked that I sit next to her. That much I know because her mother told me when we arrived, and I could see from my wife's face that this was information she was delivering neutrally, without endorsement. I sat next to her. We talked. She was tired in the way you're tired when something enormous is finally over. She kept looking around the table at everyone. She'd thank someone for coming, turn to someone else, then turn back to me. I couldn't have done the second placement without you, she said, quietly, between the appetizers and the mains. You did the placement, I said. You drove me there every morning for 2 weeks when my car was in the shop, 45 minutes each way. I was awake anyway. She looked at me for a moment. You're the worst at accepting things, she said. It wasn't an insult. It was the kind of thing you say to someone you know. I was thinking about that, about being the worst at accepting things, when my son-in-law stood up to make a toast. He spoke about his daughter's resilience. He made a joke about the amount of money they had spent on textbooks. He thanked his own parents, who had flown in from Calgary for the weekend. He thanked my wife by name, said she had been a constant source of love and support throughout everything, and he raised his glass. He didn't say my name. I don't know if it was intentional. I don't think it was malicious. I think I was simply not in the version of the story he was telling, the same way I had not been in the version of the story my wife had told at her daughter's wedding reception all those years before. I was present in the room, but I was not present in the narrative. My wife was sitting to my left. She was clapping. She didn't look at me. And I thought about the corsage. I thought about the speech I didn't give. I thought about 45 minutes each way for 2 weeks, and garden boxes in Sudbury, and Tuesday evenings at ballet, and a parking lot on Bayview Avenue. I thought about 31 years of not arguing. And then I did the thing I had never done before. I pushed back my chair, quietly, the way you do when you don't want to disturb anyone. I picked up my jacket from where I'd hung it on the back of the seat. I set my napkin on the table with the care you take when you want to leave a place the way you found it. My granddaughter looked at me. I put my hand on her shoulder for just a moment. I didn't say anything because I didn't need to. She understood. I could see from her face that she understood. I walked out. Outside, it had turned cold, the way Toronto evenings in April always turn cold the moment the sun drops. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, jacket half on, trying to remember where I'd parked. 3 blocks north, I thought, maybe 4. There was a man sitting on the low concrete ledge near the entrance, older, a sleeping bag rolled under his arm, a Tim Hortons cup on the ground beside him with a few coins in it. He looked up when I came out. I don't know exactly why I did it. I've thought about it since, and I think it was because I had nothing else useful to do with my hands. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small folded envelope I had been carrying since that morning. It contained a card. On the card I had written something to my granddaughter that I had not been able to say out loud, had not been given the opportunity to say out loud. Something about what I thought of her, what I believed about who she was going to be. I had not given it to her at dinner. I'd been waiting for the right moment, and the right moment had not come, and now I was standing on a sidewalk in the cold. I stood there for what must have been 2 full minutes, just holding it. Then I reached into my other pocket and found my wallet. I had $80 in cash, which I almost never carry. I folded the bills and put them beside the Tim Hortons cup, not in it, beside it. I didn't put the envelope down. That one I kept. The man looked at the money and then up at me. "Rough night?" he said. "Not particularly," I said. "Just long." He nodded. He seemed to accept this. We stayed like that for a moment. 2 older men on a cold sidewalk, both of us carrying things, neither of us elaborating. "There's a shelter on Sherborne," I said. "Good one. My church group volunteers there. I know it," he said. "Okay," I said. I walked to my car. I sat in it for a few minutes with the heat running. I looked at the card in my hands. Then I drove home. What happened after I left is something I learned over the following days, in pieces, from different people. Apparently, my granddaughter noticed I was gone within a few minutes and asked her mother where I was. Her mother said she didn't know. My son-in-law, to his credit, offered to go look for me. My wife said I had probably just needed some air. My granddaughter stood up from the table. She walked out of the restaurant and stood on the sidewalk calling my cell phone. I was already driving and I didn't hear it. She left a voicemail. I heard it when I got home, her voice very careful and very controlled, saying, "Elliot, I need you to call me when you get this. I'm sorry. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm sorry." I called her back. She answered immediately. "I'm home," I said. "I'm fine. Why did you leave?" I thought about how to answer that. I thought about 31 years of not arguing, and the speech I didn't give, and the corsage. "I don't know that I have a quick answer for that," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mom said something this morning, didn't she? About your flower." It startled me. I hadn't said anything about it to anyone. "How did you know that?" "Because I saw her face when you came out wearing it," she said, "and I saw yours." We were both quiet. "I have something for you," I said. "A card. I was going to give it to you at dinner. Can I come get it tomorrow?" "Of course," I said. "I'll make coffee." She came the next morning alone, without telling her mother where she was going. She sat at my kitchen table, which is the same kitchen table I have had for 22 years, bought at a used furniture place in the annex the year I moved into this house. She drank the coffee. She read the card. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Is there something going on with you and Grandma?" "There have been some things going on for a while," I said carefully. "How long?" "Long." She put the card down on the table. "Does she know that you know? That these things are going on?" "I'm not certain," I said. She looked at the card again. I had written, among other things, that I had watched her grow from a watchful 8-year-old who used to sit at the top of the stairs when the adults thought she was in bed, into a person who walked toward difficult things instead of away from them. I had written that this quality, that particular kind of courage, was the most valuable thing I had ever witnessed in a young person, and that I was grateful I had been close enough to see it. "You never told me you noticed that," she said. "About the stairs." "I noticed a lot of things," I said. There was a long silence after that, the comfortable kind. I want to be clear about what happened next, because I'd found that people assume the story has to arrive somewhere dramatic to count. What happened next was not dramatic. It was quiet, the way the real things tend to be. My wife and I had a conversation, several conversations, over several weeks that were the most honest ones we had managed in probably 15 years. Not angry, not accusatory, just clear. I said the things I had not said. She said some things I had not expected her to say, including that she had known for a long time that she had been using the distance between me and her daughter and her grandchildren as a way of making herself feel central. She didn't use those exact words. She said, "I think I was afraid you didn't need me to translate anymore." I thought that was probably accurate. I told her about the speech I had tried to give at the wedding 26 years ago. She said she hadn't known I'd been planning to say something. I didn't believe her, fully, but I didn't argue. What changed is quieter than people expect. We see a therapist now, the two of us together, on Thursday afternoons in an office above a pharmacy on St. Clair Avenue. I will tell you honestly, I don't know how it ends. I don't know if 31 years of certain habits can be fully unmade. I'm not sure that's even the right question. What I know is this. My granddaughter called me the following week to ask if I would come to her pinning ceremony. Pinning is the ceremony for nurses when they receive their pins. It is smaller than convocation, less formal, more personal. I said I would come. She said, "If you want to say something, say something. I'll make sure there's space." I told her I would think about it. The day of the pinning, I wore a small white lily in my lapel. The same florist, the same flower. My wife was there. She looked at it when I put my jacket on, and I looked at her, and she didn't say anything. Not a word. I don't know if that was progress or simply acceptance. Maybe they're the same thing at our age. When the moment came, I stood up. My granddaughter looked at me from across the room. I had the card with me. I brought it, even though she'd already read it, because I needed something to hold. I said 3 things. I said I was proud of her. I said I was grateful I had been present for enough of her life to know who she actually was. And I said that, in my experience, the people who walk toward difficult things, who don't flinch, who don't look away, are the people who change what's around them just by being in the room. I sat down. The room was quiet for a moment. Then her mother started to clap. And then everyone else. My wife didn't look at me when I sat down. She was looking at her granddaughter. But her hand found mine under the table, and she held it, briefly, the way you hold onto something you've almost let go of, but haven't quite yet. The lily was still in my lapel, a little bent by then from the drive over, but still there. Still white. I had worn it. I had stayed. I had said what I needed to say. That's the whole of it, I think. Some stories don't end. They just reach a place where you can breathe again. And for now, for today, that's enough.